I'm about to give you a comprehensive, free tutorial on the features and operation of the Rane Performer and the Rane 4 DJ controllers for Serato DJ Pro, focusing mainly on the hardware functions rather than the software. You know, no controllers offer better control of Serato, and with these two, you get the choice of static or motorized jog wheels. One of them is likely to be a great choice for pretty much any serious DJ who wants to use Serato DJ Pro. Now, if you're coming from another Rane controller or another Serato controller, or you already know how to use any kind of DJ system really, do check out our table of contents. You can hit Control or Command and F, and depending on your computer, type in the keyword. If we've got a chapter marker for it, it will be highlighted. And then you can hit the time code and it will jump to that specific part of this video. You'll see this video is very, very long. It's designed to be a video manual, a reference manual. So please do come back as often as you like. Now, just a word of warning, if you're a pure beginner or you're an intermediate DJ, this video alone is not going to be enough for you to play great DJ sets with your new Rane controller. There are many skill sets and pieces of knowledge that you have to be able to crush it as a DJ. So I can teach you about this piece of gear, but if you don't understand the rest of the gear you need, or how to find and organize the music, or the basics of counting and timing and beat mixing, or the skills of programming and performing, or how to get bookings, or to record mixes, or to read a crowd, and you know, all that kind of stuff, you will need some extra help. When I got started back in '92, we didn't have YouTube. We had to learn by trial and error. I learned on cheap turntables and a crappy Gemini mixer, and it took me years of frustration before I got good. I remember nearly giving up several times, but I didn't. I stuck with it, and DJing became my career. It's brought me decades of joy. So let me make you a promise. Yes, if you're new to this, you're going to run into some frustrations, but my job is to get you through them. The teaching style that we use at my school, Digital DJ Tips, is to focus on the end result, on actually getting you quickly to be able to play real DJ sets. That's where the magic happens. And that's also where the real learning happens. It's not in your bedroom, it's not in your home studio, it's actually when you're performing. So if you like what you see here, I've got two extra resources for you. Well, first, we're the world's #1 DJ school. We've got courses and plans to suit every type of DJ. So do come and take a look at digitaldjtips.com and see how we can help you become a better DJ or DJ producer. Our training is a phenomenal investment in your DJing. But secondly, do check out our best-selling book on DJing Rock the Dance Floor, which is now in its second edition. It's a fantastic primer on those 5 big areas of DJing: gear, music, mixing, performing, and success. It's helped tens of thousands of DJs to get started. There's a link in the description, but I'll also tell you how you can get a free copy of this book later on. So we've got a tremendous amount of information to cover. So let's get started. So this is the Rane 4. You're not going to see this very much in this tutorial, but don't worry if you're a Rane 4 potential owner or owner, because everything in this tutorial, I mean literally 99% of what you're going to see, is on both units. The reason I'm going to use the other one, the Rane Performer, for this tutorial is it's got everything the Rane 4's got, and then a few, just literally a few extra bits and pieces. And so that's the most obvious one to show you all the features on. But seriously, they're very, very close. I mean, let's just quickly talk through the differences, because this isn't a review, but you know, you might be on the fence. Do I go for the 4? Do I go for the Performer? You know, cutting to the chase, if you're an open format DJ, you do a bit of everything, the 4 is probably going to be better. If you're a scratch DJ, you like the idea of motorized platters, because that's the biggest difference, and you just want a tiny bump in quality in a couple of areas that I'm about to point out. Then the Performer, extra weight, extra cost, but you will find that that's probably better for you. Right, so let's just have a little look at the differences. So the biggest difference again is the jog wheel. When I press play, it doesn't go round on the Rane Performer, on the Rane 4, and when I press stop, as you heard, it took a little while to stop there. There's no knob up here to decide the stop time, which you do get on the Performer. You have to do that in the software. You can change that, but you have to change it in the software. The display is far simpler in the Rane 4. So when we come to look at the displays, I'll be showing you how you can get the library, for instance, to show on the display. on the Rane Performer. You can't do that on this one. The display here gives you all the useful information, and you can turn off or on the marker here and other bits and pieces, which I'll show you when we get to the very end of this video and talk through all the settings that you can adjust here. However, there's very simple stuff compared to what you can do on the Rane Performer in the middle of the Jogwheel. The buttons are a little bit clickier. They're a little bit softer on the Rane Performer. The faders, you can't adjust the tension of the up faders on the Rane 4. You can take this whole panel off and you can adjust the up fader tension on the Rane Performer. Again, if you're a scratch DJ performing routines, you might find that is something that pushes you more towards the Performer. You can adjust the tension on the crossfader on this one, but again, you have to take the panel off. On the Rane Performer, there's a little knob, which you'll see a little bit later on when we look at the front of that unit, where you can do that without taking the panel off to set the crossfader to exactly how you want it. And you're missing 5 of the effects, specifically the fader effects, which we will look at on the Performer. So you only get 22, I think, effects on here, missing 5 of them off the Performer, which use these faders to trigger the effect, but they're not on this one. However, the 22 that you do get are very, very good. And you can even turn off the fader effects in the Rane Performer because some DJs just don't want them and they're just in the way. So don't feel that that is a deal breaker at all between the units. The biggest thing is, do you want motorized jogs or not? Yes, go for the Performer. No, stick with the 4. Everything clear? Cool. Well, let's switch this one out for the Performer then and carry on. Before doing anything else, you should check that you're running the latest Serato DJ Pro software, that you're running the latest firmware on the unit itself, and you have the drivers installed. So let's start with the drivers and the firmware. Go to rane.com and click on downloads, and from there scroll to the unit that you own. In this case, we're going to update the Performer. Now, the drivers are software that runs on your computer, your Windows computer or your Mac, that helps it to work effectively. The firmware is the stuff that runs on the unit itself and makes sure everything is working smoothly, and they're both worth checking. So the first thing to check on the unit itself is whether you actually need to update the firmware. And so the way we do that is by going into the menu. So let's do that. So you're going to hold down the Shift button, which is here. There's also one here. And you're going to hold down the menu button, which is this button here. Hold down Shift, hold down menu, and then you'll get this little display here. And this little display is your menu. You can move up and down through the menu using this little joystick here. And that's showing you all the menu items you've got available. I'm going to go down to this one here, firmware, and I'm going to click the parameter button slightly off screen. And you see we've got displays and DSP. So I'm going to go to the left to see 1.1.00 for the displays. And the DSP, I'm going to go to see it is 1.1.0.11. So we're going to compare that to what's on the screen here. And on the screen here, we can see that the firmware, the latest version, is 1.2, and so we saw 2 numbers there which were both below this 1.2, and so we're going to download this latest version here. Now you get a Mac and a Windows version. I'm going to click on the Mac version as I'm running a Mac. It comes down to my downloads folder. Now while we're here, we might as well grab our drivers. I haven't installed the drivers yet, so they're not on this computer, and look into the downloads folder, and there they both are. So what we do with these is slightly different, because one of them is to go, as we were talking about, onto the computer, and the other one is to go onto the unit itself. Let's start with, I guess, the easier of the two, which is simply installing the drivers. I'm just going to double click on there. Now remember that this is a uninstaller, and so it's worth keeping this on your computer should you ever sell the unit or want to uninstall the software. This is what you have to click on to do a good job of that. So all the usual stuff, nothing unusual at all about the way this installs. We are done. Okay, so now that we've done all of that, we can move on to the firmware, and then we'll have a full restart so we're ready to go after we've also grabbed Serato. So firmware updater, I'm going to double click on there, and then I'm going to double click on here. Now, because the unit is plugged into the computer, I've already plugged the USB lead that comes with it into my computer, and obviously I've already powered it up. Because of this, it knows that we are trying to install the firmware, and it tells us, it confirms that the firmware version currently running on the device is this one here, but the one we want is this one here. So I just have to click update firmware. Then the unit has various things on to tell you it's updating. You can see it on the progress bar on the screen as well. Then you get a firmware updating bar on each of the decks. Moves from one to the other. There's actually 3 pieces of firmware updates, the central piece and one for each deck, but you don't need to know that. It does it all in one go for you. And then when it's done, the unit will restart. For Serato, we're going to go to the Serato website. If you don't have an account, you're going to start an account and you're going to log in. Then you're going to go to Products, Serato DJ Pro, and Download. And this is going to tell you the latest version of Serato that's available, 3.2.4. So over in the Serato software itself, click on the cog, assuming you already have Serato, of course. If not, just download and install it, and it'll tell you at the bottom the latest version. So this is 3.2.4, which is the same as this one here. So in this instance, I don't need to download it. However, once you have downloaded it, do be sure to follow the instructions on that Serato pitch and time card that comes in the box with your Performer or your 4, because you're going to need that for some of the key shifting features in the software. Right, so with the software installed, the drivers installed, and the firmware installed, I'm going to reboot that computer now, as it often says when you've installed new drivers. And as it told me a few minutes ago, I want to reboot the computer, get Serato up and running again, and then we can start looking at the controller. You've already seen plugging in the computer and the power, but the other sockets around the back here give you far more options for inputs and outputs. So let's talk through those. Let's start over here. I've actually already plugged in 2 microphones, and the reason I've done that is I want to show you that the 2 microphone sockets on this unit can both take either of these kinds of plug. So this is a 1/4 inch jack and this is an XLR. It doesn't matter which one you use, they will both work in either of those. Moving along, we've got our inputs for our decks. These can be CD decks or they can be phono or record decks, and these can be switched using these little switches here and here, so that each one can be set to whether it's a record deck or a CD or a line level input. If you get that wrong, you either won't hear it very loud at all or it'll be really, really distorted. You'll soon know. This pin here is for connecting the 3rd lead on some brands of record deck like Technics, which is an earth lead. So that just screws onto there. You can put 2 earth leads onto 1 pin, which is why there's only 1 pin for the 2 sockets there. So moving along, we've got our outputs. So these are balanced 1/4 inch jack booth outputs for the DJ booth speakers. This is unbalanced RCA outputs for the master, and there's a stereo mono button switch there as well. So if you're plugging into a mono sound system, you'll set that to mono. And then here we've got the XLR, which is the professional balanced outputs for running longer cables off to PA systems. And then here there's a USB input for a second computer as well, because you can have 2 laptops connected at once to the unit. And round the front of the unit, there's just the headphones inputs, and you get 2. You get the old school 1/4 inch jack, and you also get the smaller 1/8 inch headphone jack socket as well. They both take exactly the same output from the unit. It just depends upon what plug is on the headphones that you've got. So with all that covered, let's start to look at some of the features of the unit. And we're going to start by a look at the deck section. So one of the first things that people who are new to this kind of controller often ask is, look, it's got 4 channels and it can control 4 different inputs, but there's only 2 jog wheels. So how does that work? Well, that works by using these buttons here. These buttons here are called the layer buttons. You get decks 1 and 3 on this side, and you get decks 2 and 4 over on this side, which corresponds to the decks in Serato. So here in Serato, again, we can only see 2 decks at the top, but they will cycle between both of them just by pressing the buttons on the unit. So if you watch at the top now of Serato, you'll see that the deck that's showing is the one that I've pressed. You can make this easier for yourself to understand by heading over into Serato and using your mouse, going to the top and clicking here on this little button that says 4. Now it'll show me all 4 decks at the expense of the library down at the bottom. We can hardly see anything in our library now because it's got 4 waveforms and 4 decks. But now you can see that when I press these buttons from 1 to 3, because these are the left-hand 2 decks, in the software, it's showing me which one I currently have selected. I'm going to switch back to the 2-deck view in Serato here so that you can see a little bit more of the library on the screen, which is the bottom half of the Serato screen. Because to move through the currently selected playlist in the library, you grab this knob here. It's called the scroll load encoder. Now, the second I grab that, you might have seen that on the display in the middle of the Jogwheel, it started to show me the playlist, which you can also see I'm scrolling through here. So you've got two places to look for that. When you found the track you want to load onto the deck that you've currently got selected, whether that's in this case 1 or 3, you press down the encoder and it will load that track. You can see it loading here, and it also loads in the software. You can see it loading at the top there. When that's loaded, you're ready to play. Now, if you double tap the opposite encoder to the one that a track is playing on, it will what's called instant double that track. It will start the track playing that's playing on the opposite side on the deck whose encoder you double tap at exactly the same place and at exactly the same speed. Instant doubles is a great way of quickly throwing something onto another deck to free up the deck you're using, or to free up the hand that you prefer to scratch with. So this is easy to do. Let's demonstrate it now. Start that one playing there. And so this is the one that's currently playing. So the opposite one, I'm going to double tap on here, keep an eye on the waveform here. That's now started playing, and this is its channel. And you can hear I've got 2 copies of the same track there playing together. And finally, for the library, when you're looking through a playlist, if you want to go back in your tree, so it's easy to see this on the laptop itself, you can see I'm currently looking through the playlist, but by pressing this button here, which has got back written on it, it will take me back to the directory. See on the very, very, very far left now. So now I can go through and find somewhere else to go and scroll. And then when I'm ready, I can press the load button again here. And instead of loading a track, because there's no track to load because we're in our folders, it will then go back to that playlist, whichever one that is. Serato has a prepare window. It's a bit like pulling your records halfway out of the record box. And in order to add tracks to the prepare window, instead of loading them, you select the track in the way we just looked at, but now you hold down Shift and you press this button here, Load Prep. And this is an example of a shift function. Anything written in orange underneath, or in the different shade underneath if you're using the Rane 4, is going to be affected when you hold down Shift. So holding down Shift on the currently selected track on the screen, I'm going to tap this button here, and then you can see that it's added it to my prepare window. Here at the top of the screen, this is where you turn the prepare window on and off to view it. And then here I've got all my current tracks, and they're also showing here. So if I move again, and this time I'm going to do it with this screen. So I want to put this track here into the prepare window and hold down Shift and press that there. This one's now been added to the prepare window, and you can see that on the laptop screen there. I've now got 2 tracks there. An open prepare window becomes like any other, and you can use that back button on here to cycle between the prepare window and the file tree and the main window. So I'm going to press the button off camera now. So now you can see that the blue line in the prepare window means that when I press this here, it will load the track that's selected there. Let's look at some of the controls that let you alter the speed, the pitch range, and the pitch of your track. So here on the decks, you get sets of controls to the right of each platter here, which is where you do this stuff. So this is the pitch fader or the pitch slider, the most important control when it comes to altering the speed of a track. So this will push the track slower and faster depending on whether you put it up or down. So notice there's a click in the middle and a light, which will tell you that you are dead center, no faster or no slower than the track was originally recorded. So here we have a range button, and this changes the range. You see this plus and minus 8 here in the Jogwheel display. If I move this all the way down here, that is now at minus 8%. And if I move it all the way up, it's at plus 8%. And the BPM is changing accordingly as well. So this can be altered by pressing the range button here. If I press the range button once, that now changes to 16%. And if I press it again, it goes to a much more extreme 50%. Generally, you want this set so that the lowest and highest values that you might want in your mixing are represented on the slider, but no more. Because the reason for that is that you don't want a huge pitch range when you're never using it. You're not using all of the control then, you're just using a little bit of the control and you're losing the accuracy. Most DJs leave it set to a range which just about covers what they need, but nothing else, so that it's very accurate, which is useful for manual beat mixing and so on. And if you do need to use a wider range, for instance, you're mixing in a song or a DJ tool or whatever, where it is way off from the pitch or the tempo of the track you're currently using, then you can set it to one of those high values just for that and then set it back afterwards. You notice I used the word pitch there. These controls are called historically pitch controls because one thing they alter as well as the tempo is the pitch of the track. In other words, how high or how low it is. Now, you may want that, you may not want that. And if you don't want that, there is a way of turning that off. So if you press this range button here, but with the shift button held, it turns what's called Keylock on. And now when I slow this down and speed it up, it's still set to plus or minus 50. So this is going to be a huge change in tempo. You'll hear that the pitch doesn't change because the key is locked, and hence the term Keylock. Down here we have the pitch bend buttons. I'm going to turn Keylock off again. Pitch bend is a way of changing the speed of the track temporarily. And that means that you don't have to engage with the platter at all. If you want to just nudge and speed it up and slow it down that way, you can just use these buttons to do it. So they're like this. Notice how it progressively speeds up and slows down the track. Now underneath the pitch bend buttons are these two 33 and 45 numbers, and they govern how fast the platter is turning around. In a second we're going to move on and talk more about the platter, but while we're down here, that's where these controls are. So why do you have that? Well, some DJs prefer their spinning platters to go at 33 and some at 45. That's where you make that change. Of course, if you're going to change that in the middle of playing a song, then you're going to hear that big speed change. So let's do that. I'm going to hold down shift, switch it to 45. And 33, and you saw that changing. Now, if you want to change that permanently, in other words, you want it to always be at your choice of speed, that's easy to do. You can do that in the software as well. Top right, click on the little cog, go to DJ preferences, and then go down to virtual deck speed. If I set that to 45 now, then I've got a deck speed that is correct when it's on the 45 setting rather than the 33 setting. Now at this stage, I just want to remind you, if you're a Rane 4 user, there's a few bits and pieces in here which aren't relevant for you. Your platters are static, and that means you get the scratch behavior on the top and the nudge behavior on the edge. But some of the stuff we're about to look at is like the bit we just looked at then, not for you. You might want to skip on across the next few minutes. Want to see something cool about the Rane Performers platters? I'm going to move on to show you the Jogwheel displays, but first I want to show you something mechanical you might not have spotted yet. Now, I'm hoping you haven't thrown away this. It wasn't just an instruction manual. It actually was a package that came with your Rane Performer that contains these rings. Now, these rings are plastic and felt, and they're designed to go underneath the platter to give you a different feel when you're doing this. And so they are useful. Lift the platter off, get a finger underneath each piece of vinyl like that. It just comes off. It's an acrylic piece of centerpiece there, so you can see through and see the jog. Now underneath there, we've got a plastic ring and a felt ring. And these give you that feel. So you can experiment with different combinations of them based upon what is given to you in the box to find the feel that works for you. It's like having slip mats underneath real vinyl. And of course, when you find the one that you want, make sure you remember to set it over on this one as well, or else you're going to get a different feel on each platter, which I'm going to guess is not something you're looking for. Let's look at a couple more things on the screen while we're here then. So the needle position here moves nice and smoothly, but that's because in the software, in the settings again, and in library and display, I have this maximum screen updates per second set all the way up here to 60. Now this does use a little bit more power, so this is why a good laptop is definitely an advantage. But having that set there means that these displays here will just look smoother and be more useful to you when you're using them. If these are juttery or you just don't think it feels smooth enough, then that is where to go and look. See if you've got that set as high as possible. One or two more things down there then. Here we've got the BPM, we've already looked at that. Here we've got the pitch range and current pitch setting, we've already looked at that. Down at the bottom here, we've got the time left on the track. This is telling you the loop length that's set on this deck. We'll talk about looping shortly. And up here is beat jump. So beat jump's a feature that lets you jump forward and back a set number of beats in a track. Now it's very musical because those set number of beats are in bars, and this means your audience can often never notice that you're doing it. So this is telling you where the beat jump setting is. It's currently at 16 beats or 4 bars, and that can be changed. So the beat jump controls themselves, if you want to do a beat jump, if you like, are these two buttons at the top here. Pressing this one back will jump back by the set number of beats. Pressing it forward will jump forward by the set number of beats. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Also in here, of course, you can see we've got the main waveform of the track we're currently listening to. This is the waveform of the track on the other deck, which can help with mixing because you can visually line the beats up. And this is the whole waveform of the track you're currently listening to, from the beginning of the track to the end of the track. And these little triangles are showing you where the cue points are set. Again, we'll talk a little bit more about that soon. Now, if you're looking very carefully when I was showing you the beat jump buttons there, you might have seen the red underneath those buttons. And indeed, underneath the buttons here, we've got display mode. And that means by holding down shift and tapping left or right, we can move through different modes on the display. So I'm holding down shift now and I'm tapping, and you can see now we're seeing a different view here that's showing the amount elapsed and a few other features like whether slip mode is on, whether sync is turned on, and then one more time we're here to the view of the artwork, and because I have no artwork on this track, it's just giving me the Rane logo there. Notice that across the top and bottom, as we cycle through these views, we're retaining all that essential information about the pitch and about the BPM and about how far through the track we are, and also the looping and the beat jumping. Okay, I want to show you a couple of other controls now around here that help you with manipulating your music. So first, back to beat jump. So you remember there's a beat jump value here in the Jogwheel. This is where it's changed. We move the beat jump length here, up and down, and then in the Jogwheel, you can see that number there is going from 1 to 2 to 4 to 8 to 16, 32. And that's the number of beats that it will jump backwards and forwards once more when we press these backwards and forwards. Now it's not actually written underneath that knob, but if you hold down shift and turn it, it will move you backwards and forwards through the track like this. You notice how this is telling me how far through the track I am, and you'll notice how this is moving backwards and forwards as I turn the knob. And you'll also notice how it doesn't sound too bad because it's maintaining the beats and bar structure underneath as you do it. So again, a very quick way of moving through the track using these controls here. This knob here is the stop time. So when you hit stop on the deck, it stops instantly at the moment, right? But if I turn this up, then it'll take a little while and sound more natural. So you can have it set so it's literally like turning off a real turntable at the end of the night by pushing it all the way up. Age-old trick from back in the day, that one. Or you can have it set just a tiny bit up, just to give that little feel of real vinyl when you're manipulating your music. It just sounds a little bit more natural, right? So this word slip here is slip mode, which is this button here. Slip mode will let you do stuff like using cue points or scratching or whatever, and as soon as you turn it off again, the track will just jump in again where it would have been had you done nothing. It's a performance feature, certainly not one you want to leave on by mistake because it can completely mess your head up when you've forgotten that it's switched on. Nonetheless, it's useful to have, and that's why this view is quite nice because it tells you very clearly if slip mode is on. Let's have a little look at slip mode then. So this is now set blue, and if I scratch, Notice it's retaining the beat underneath. And you can see that because the needle here is jumping to where it would have been had I not held the track back. Which it won't do with slip mode turned off, of course. Now whisper it, but for whatever reason, some people don't like the platters going round. Now, if that's you, then of course the Rane 4 is for you. But there is a way of turning the platters off on the Rane Performer. That's on the slip button as well. Holding down Shift and tapping motor will turn the motor off. Now the track will play, but the motor isn't going round. Unfortunately, scratching doesn't work. The whole thing's a big nudge. Which I don't understand. If they'd have kept the scratch feature here, which it is when it's paused, if they'd have kept the top as a scratch feature and the edge as a nudge, it would be just like any other Jogwheel, but no motor. I really don't understand why they didn't do that. There's a missed trick there. The moral of this story is, if you want motorized platters, go for the Rane Performer, and if you don't want motorized platters, go for the Rane 4. Don't buy the Performer thinking you're getting the best of both worlds, because unfortunately, you're not. Moving on here then, we've got the Censor button. This will play the track momentarily backwards for as long as you're holding it. When you take your finger off it, the track will carry on playing forwards. If you hold down Shift and press this, it will play the track backwards entirely, and then it will just carry on playing forwards again once you've taken your hand off it. So the reason for these two controls, reverse is clearly something you might want to use in a performance situation, but Censor or silent cue is a good one because, for instance, if you're playing to a crowd and you suddenly remember there's a curse word coming up in a song, you can hold that button down just as you get to the curse word. It plays backwards momentarily, so the curse word passes underneath, and when you take your hand off, it carries off from where it would have been otherwise. Now, you can change that button to silent cue mode, which is something you do in the menus that we'll get onto a little bit later on. And that's a way of tapping that button to make the track go completely quiet until you press a hot cue, or actually there's something else you can press to get it to come back again. It's a performance feature. As I say, we'll look at that menu a bit later on. Of course, all the way through this demo, I've been starting and stopping the music, unsurprisingly using this button here. Now, if you hold down the Shift button and press this, it's a stutter cue. And we'll talk about cues in a bit, but for now, this is just going to jump to the temporarily set cue point and let you stutter it like this. And as soon as you take your hand off the button, it will just carry on playing. So let's talk about the cue button. So the cue button will set a temporary cue point, a point you want to jump back to temporarily. So in this track, I've got mine on a string stab at the beginning of a bar. So in order to set it, you go to the place where you want the temporary cue point to be and you press that cue button. So here's my software, and the deck I'm currently playing from is the right hand deck. So if I move this platter here, you will see that. So say I wanted the cue point to be, I don't know, well, it's already set there, so let's go somewhere else. Let's say I wanted it to be there somewhere. I'd go to there, I'd press cue, and you'll see the cue point is now moved to there. Now if I press the cue button, it's ready for me to play from there. And if I'm playing the track, to jump back to it, just press the cue button again. And there we go, it's jumped back to it. And I'm ready to play from that point again. Now, if I want to jump back to it and just play automatically, again, that's where holding down Shift and playing Start, Stop will do the job for me. Thing to remember about the temporary cue is it's only temporary, so as soon as you accidentally or deliberately press it when the track is paused somewhere else, it will move it to that point. And that's the other thing to remember. When the track is not playing, the cue point will be moved to wherever you are in the track. When the track is playing, it will jump back to the cue point you currently have set You might also have noticed there that we have another little cue point on our waveform here. This is the temporary one, the white one, but we also have the green one. These are hot cues, and we'll move on to talk about hot cues in a little bit, but on the unit itself, the hot cues are here. That's what these two colored lights are. Again, we'll move on to look at this in a little bit. Let's look at our shift functions then. Underneath the cue point, you can see we've got this little double backwards arrow. That's telling us that by holding shift and pressing Q, it will jump to the beginning of the track. So hold shift and press Q. Bang, we're right at the beginning of the track, as you can see there. And underneath the sync button, we've got this off. Now, sync is a feature which lets you sync two tracks together. Of course, it's the infamous sync button. Tap it to turn it on, but tapping it again will not turn it off. In order to turn it off, you have to hold down shift and press sync, and now it's off again, and you can see it's not lit anymore. I know, you really want to look at those performance pads. They are cool. We're going to get onto those. But first, I want to introduce you to a feature of the Rane Performer and the 4, which involves stems. Now, if you don't know what stems are, they're a way of, in real time, separating the vocals, the instrumental, so that's the melody and the bass, and the drums from each other. You can turn them on, mute them, remove them from the mix, so you can have instant acapellas, instant instrumentals, and so on. It's a really powerful feature of digital DJ. And the Rane controllers do it very well because they've got some pretty deeply integrated functions that you don't find on other devices. And the one we're going to look at now is called Stems Split. So Stem Split will put the vocal on one deck and the instrumental on the other instantly. It's a bit like instant doubles we were talking about before. So there's two sets of stem split buttons. There's one set here for the right hand deck, which will immediately put the vocal when you press it onto deck 2 and the instruments to deck 4. And then over on the left hand deck, we have the same setup where it'll put the instruments onto deck 3 and the vocals onto deck 1. And you're going to need to make sure you've got all your channels set the same. So if you're going to do this in the middle of a set, make sure all your gains and your EQs and your volumes and your effects are set exactly where they are set, so it doesn't sound weird the second you press the button. But this is what I've got set up here now. I've got both of these channels turned up, and if I hit play on this deck now without stem split on, you'll hear the track that I've got ready. You can see it's coming through this channel here, channel 2. I'm now going to press stem split and listen to what happens. So nothing happened, did it? Because I've got all the levels set the same here. But look here, we've got stuff going on both channels now. In fact, we've got the vocals on this one and the instruments on this one. Even better, because they're playing together now, right? Even better, if I want to just take over one of them, I can just press its button up here and then I can grab it. If you want to turn that feature off and resync the a cappella with the instrumental across those two channels, you tap the stem split button again, and then you tap it again to get completely out of stem split mode and back to where you were before. Okay, let's take a look at those lovely multicolored performance pads. Each deck has its own set of 8 rubberized, but they also have a click pads. They have a set of displays above them and a set of buttons here to select what mode the pads are in. Unlike nearly every other function on the unit, the function written in red or in orange or in grey if you're on the Rane 4 underneath is not accessed by holding down shift and pressing that button. So in order to access hot cues, rolls, sampler and stem, you just press the button for the one you want. To get the ones underneath, you just double tap it. So to get pitch play, double tap. To get scratch bank, double tap. There is one shift function and it's only on the first one. This gets you into a special mode where you can program these buttons to do custom things, which I will talk you through in a minute. These displays here give you the current pad mode or parameters which are associated with the current pad mode. And these buttons here let you change parameters, which again depend upon the pad mode that you've got set. And finally, before we look at the individual modes, all of which operate on both units without any additional software except pitch play, which does need the pitch and time expansion pack, which you do get with the unit, but make sure you've enabled that if you can't get pitch play to work. We're going to move on and look at all the individual ways of using this, but I do want to show you combination mode first. So this is, if you want to use 2 pad modes at once, you can have the top 4 pads from each mode by holding down one of them and tapping another one. So if I want the top 4 hot cues and the top 4 from my sampler, I can just hold on hot cue and press sampler. So now I've got hot cues on the top 4 and sampler on the bottom 4. Where the parameter buttons do affect one of the pad modes, they will always affect the one that you've got onto the top 4 buttons. Right, so let's now take a look through all of those individual modes, and we'll start off with hot cue mode, the one you're probably going to be using the most. So hot cue mode is the first button, and hot cue mode lets you set a cue point on your track at any point for each of the buttons, and then you can jump back to it. If the track's playing, it will play from there. If the track's paused, it will go there and wait for you to hit play. So for instance, let's just find a nice beat. That's a beat there. Let's get the software up so you can see the waveform as well. That's where my temporary cue point is set, which is why you've got the little white triangles there. So if I want to set a hot cue there, I press my first hot cue button. It lights up in red, and I now can mix from there. Let's keep playing. Set a couple more. So you'll notice I've set a few more hot cue points. I can jump to them. You'll see that they are set in the software at the same color that they're set to on the hot cues here. And also, let's set them all so you can see all the colors we've got. Also, to delete them, you just go like this, shift and press the one you want to delete. Notice that in the displays, it's giving us the seconds where the hot cue occurs. 35.1, 37.3, etc. And that corresponds with the number of seconds through the track that you are in the software. But you can change that. You can have these displays give you names for each of the hot cues. So the way you do that is by getting into the software itself and changing the hot cue's name in there. So I'll show you how to do that now. We've got here our hot cues listed. You see we've got the colors, we've got the times as well. Double clicking on a time will let me put in a name for it. So if I put this in as, for instance, start, that will now show me the word start here against that hot cue. And so it's easier to see where we're at when we load a track, because these hot cues persist. You don't have to do them every time you load a track, of course. They stay with the track every time you load it, and that will always be called start there. By the way, if you can't see on your software screen the list of hot cues like I've got there, it's because you've got something set differently in your software. I'll show you where you can go and change that. Head up to the top right-hand corner, click the settings cog, go to library and display, and make sure you haven't got performance pad cue layout ticked. If you did have performance pad cue layout ticked, you'd now get a admittedly quite nice little view here where each of the pads has got its own little software pad as well. So if I put the other pads back onto hot cues, you'll see that they've all got a nice little pad at the top there, but you do lose the name or the ability to name there. We've still got the name written down there. There is one more function down here, and this is something called flip. Now, flip is a way of recording what you do when you're playing a track with the cue points. So if you've got your cue points set at the beginning of a breakdown, the beginning of the vocal, the end of the track or whatever, you can use the cue points to jump around the track and it will remember what you do. And then in the future, when you come to play that track, it will give you the option of playing back the version that you kind of, well, live remixed using the hot cues. It's a great little feature. It's unique to Serato. And while, again, this isn't a software course, I'm not going to teach you how to use it here. We do that in Serato Made Easy. I will show you the controls on here that let you activate ARM and then play back your Serato flips, because you don't need to use the buttons and the mouse on the computer at all to do that. So Serato flip, you'll see here, I've got these controls here. This is the Serato flip controls that you turn on by pressing the little flip icon at the top here, and the buttons that allow you to do that are on the hot cue pad selector. So you have to be on hot cue. So I'm on hot cue now. Press parameter back here. You'll see that the record button has started to flash here, and that's telling me that what I do now with the hot cues will be remembered. When I finish recording, I press that again, and then I want to play back a saved flip. I press the parameter right button here. Next up is roll, or sometimes known as loop roll. You'll find this on the next button along. The buttons will turn blue, and then the screens will show us the different roll values that are triggered when we press these, from 1/32 of a beat up to 4 beats. Parameter in this instance will move up so that you get higher values, and there's actually 3 that we can't see because there are 11 in total and there are only 8 buttons. If I press parameter once, the highest one we got here, which is this button here, roll 4, becomes roll 8. Press it again, it becomes roll 16. Press it again, it becomes roll 32. And the other ones fall off the end here as well. So what does roll do? It does a loop roll for as long as our finger is on the button. Let's do it. This one here is a 16th of a beat. That's why it says 1/16 there. So this one here says a quarter of a beat. You'll notice that they are doubling or halving depending on whether you go right or left. And also you'll notice that when I take my hand off, the track carries on from where it would have been.
Remember back in the day, Saturday, technics, twix, two. I can't believe you thrill me like you do.
So next up is samplers. Serato has a very powerful sampler built in that can do all kinds of stuff. The first thing you need to know is, in order to see anything on the sampler in the software, you need to click this little foghorn at the top, which brings the sampler slots up, and you actually get 8 samples across 4 different sets of 8, so you get 32 in total. The pads on the controller are totally separate, so you can assign hot cues to this one and roll to this one, or whatever you want. There's no limitations there at all, but the samples are the same across both sides. You can't have a different set of samples on the left than on the right. They're all the same samples that you can see in the software there. So in order to demo it, let's just get something into one of these sample slots. You can drag drums or loops. I'm actually going to drag a whole track. You can do that as well. There's a lot you can do with the sampler, and we're not even going to start going into it here. However, we've now got something loaded on sample slot number 1, and you'll see here that sample slot number 1 is now lit up. To trigger the sample, I press it. To stop it, depending upon how you have it set, you can either press it again or hold down Shift and tap it. There's lots of different ways of triggering samples and deciding how they behave once you have. On the hardware itself, you have a sample level here, which is the volume that you're going to hear the sample at. Also, the parameter buttons here let you cycle through the individual sets of 8 samples or sample banks. You can see them on the screen there, and you can see that I'm now going through from A, B, C, and D to access all 32 of your samples. If you hold down the Shift button while you press those parameter buttons, it will cycle through where the sample output is being sent. So you can send the sample output to individual channels or just to the master channel via this volume here, which means you can use the samples in a channel that's got effects and all kinds of other stuff going on in it. As I say, hugely powerful feature. No time to go into how to use Serato's sampler here, but there is how you control it on the hardware. Next up then, we have stems. We've already started to look at stems because we had a little look at how you can use the dual deck function, the stems split, to put an acapella on one and an instrumental on the other. But all Serato controllers have a standard way of controlling stems, and that is on the pads. So let's look at how that works. So by pressing the stems button, we immediately see on here vocal, melody, bass, and drums. That's what these turn on or off. You can see that they are lit and not lit in the screens. Underneath, vocal echo, instrumental breaker, and drums echo are effects which remove various stems from the mix. Let's have a little go. See, I've removed the vocal there. I've removed the melody and the drums. Instant acapella. But you don't have to turn them off. You can use the effects. So a vocal echo will echo the vocal out. That was the instrumental echo. Instrument breaker. And that one echoes the drums out. Now the parameter buttons will give you an instant acapella or an instant instrumental. Pretty cool, right? The next function is the first one that is on one of those lower settings when we have to double tap quickly to get to it. And it is the pitch play. So I'm going to double tap on hotkey to get to it. This is pitch play mode. Notice on the screens it says root note. It says semitone +1, +2, +3, -4, -3, -2 and -1. This is the clue to what this does. Pitch play changes the pitch of wherever you're set on the track. To set somewhere on the track, you need to select a hot cue at the place that you want to do this. By holding down shift, you'll see all your hot cues are available to you. I'm going to set it at maybe this hot cue here. And so now I've got a hot cue ready for me to play with. So if I want to, in pitch play mode, play from that hot cue but a semitone higher or semitone +1, I press that. A semitone +2, +3. In this mode, I've got -1, -2, -3 and -4 as well. And then the one that's in white is always the one that doesn't go up or down anything. Now you can use parameter to move the white one around if you like. So if I press parameter there, then the white one is down here, which means I can't go any lower, but I can go higher. So now I can go quite a lot higher. And in the other direction, I can go a lot lower. It's a really nice way of chopping up bits of vocal and so on and coming up with new riffs around maybe a riff that people know. You can get the main first note and then you can play a different riff with it and kind of confound their expectations. A nice creative tool there, but you must have your pitch and time expansion pack enabled or else that just won't work. Next up is saved loops. Double tap on the second button along to get to save loop mode. You can save loops in the same way you can save hot cues. Now a loop is just a part of the track that you set to loop. Let's do that then. These are the controls for that. We'll talk a bit more about these in a minute, but for now let's just get a little loop going here. Okay, I've got a 2-beat loop going there and it's currently looping around. I want to save it onto this button here. So in this mode, I just tap it. Now when this is blue, it means the loop is active and playing. However, when this is green, the loop isn't active. And so now I can hit play here and you'll see on the screen, it just moves past. Now to get back to that loop and play it, I hold down shift and I press the button again. If I want to activate the loop and just let the track reach the loop and then start looping, I don't press down shift, I just press the button. Let's deactivate it, go a little bit before, hit play. It's now active. The track reaches it and triggers it. Again, to make it inactive, I just press it again. You can't delete loops by holding down shift and pressing them because I've just shown you what that does and it triggers the loop. So in order to delete the loop, you need to go into the software and you'll find it in the loop settings, which are up here. You move down from, we were looking at these before, weren't we? The hot cues. This is actually loop and you can see the loop is here. We can delete it and guess what? We can also name it if we want. So clicking there will delete the loop and it's vanished from here too. So onto the scratch bank. This is like the sampler, very similar, but instead of you triggering from the pads, the samples you want to play, it loads them onto a deck. Hence the scratch bank, because it lets you then scratch with whatever you've got stored in that slot. In the software, you need to enable this area here to see what's going on, and you do that by clicking the little scratch bank icon up there. Again, you have 4 sets, A, B, C, and D. You can move through these with the parameter buttons, just as we did with the sampler. And here you can see I've got a sample, which is called Yeah, in the first slot. There's other things you can do here, which is out of the remit of this Rane Performer and 4 video. But if you want to know more about this, again, go look at the Serato Made Easy course. So down here then, on the actual kit, we're going to double tap on the sampler button here to get to the scratch bank, which is the function underneath. You can see my Yeah sample is here. It's telling me on the screen, and you can see this is lit to tell me there is something in that slot. Were there something in the other slots, these would be lit as well, and the parameter buttons will let me move through. So I want to load this onto the deck so that I can scratch with it. I just tap it. Now keep an eye on the left hand deck and the top waveform. You see that's now loaded it. It's now there ready for me to scratch. And when I'm done, I can simply hold down the shift button and tap it again, and it disappears. You can see it's now taken me back to the track I had loaded originally. It remembers what you had loaded originally. Think of it as a way of throwing the track you've currently got loaded on a deck off the deck temporarily, loading a sample. You can indeed load whole tracks if you want, just like you can with the sampler itself, scratching with it and then getting it out again so that you can carry on doing the DJing you were doing. Now you can add things to the scratch bank pads that you happen to have on the decks. So for instance, here I've got on the left-hand deck, that track that I had loaded originally. If I want to add that to this sample slot here, this scratch bank slot here, I just tap it. And now that's been added there. You can see the name of the track is showing here. And this can now be loaded by me pressing this button, or it can be taken off the deck as with this one by holding down shift and pressing it. And you can set in the software ways of triggering either at the beginning or at a cue point. You can put all this stuff in here and it will let you choose. So I've currently got one cue point there on that sample I could have chosen from. It's a nice way not only of quickly loading scratch samples, but if you're clever, you can have whole songs ready at the places that you want to just drop them in and out and perform routines using it as well. So I've seen scratch DJs doing that too. Okay, that's scratch bank. The final double tap function is the slicer. Let's take a look at that. Access it by double tapping on the stems button to bring up the slicer function. The screen tells us slice 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And the pads have a blue pad, which is where we're currently at. And then these pads are places in the track that are yet to come. So what it does is take a 8-beat section or a 2-bar section of the track, and it slices it up into individual parts, hence the word slicer. And it lets you play those parts by tapping on the button for that particular part. And when you finish playing, it will carry on where it would have been had you not touched this. So in that sense, it's got a little bit of the slip functionality about it that we were looking at a lot earlier on. So the best way of demoing this, I always find, is actually to set a loop up. So again, we haven't formally talked about loops yet, but I will do it now. So when we get to it, it won't be much of a surprise for you. I'm going to set a loop like this. So I have a loop there across an 8-beat section of the track, a 2-bar section of the track. And that means this slicer is going to slice that 8-beat section up for me. Okay, you can see then that these little lights here are representing where we're at in that section you can see above on the track. And I can play the track by touching these. Now, if you want to make the amount that it slices less, you can halve it by pressing the parameter button. So if I do this, it will keep all this going, but it's different when I press the buttons. You can hear that it's quicker to repeat, and you can get to some pretty extreme things there. Now I've set a loop going. If I turn the loop off, it will move through the track, giving me this, which is good fun, but it's a little bit harder to explain, which is why I've left it to the end. So we'll turn the loop off, keep an eye on the screen. So I know you're probably looking forward to getting on to looking through all the juicy effects that this unit and the Rane 4 have. And of course, we like to go through all the menus and stuff as well as we are approaching the end of this, but we've got quite a bit to go. I do want to just cover off a few of the controls down there though that we haven't explicitly looked at yet. Then I want to move on and have a look at just a couple of things up on the EQs and on the mixer section that again we haven't looked at yet. So we'll start off down here looking at the loop functions. So we have kind of used these a lot, haven't we? But keep an eye on the waveform on the screen when I trigger a loop. There's that loop that we've looked at before. You can use these buttons here to half or double the length of the loop that you've just triggered. And you can see it changing in the software there as well. Notice when I pressed the loop button again, it turned it off and carried on playing. If I want to jump back to a previously set loop, I use reloop, and reloop is by pressing the shift button here and then just tapping that loop button again like this. Now you can also set manual loops down here by using shift. So if I want to set a loop at an irregular loop length, that's how you do that. So here we have the key. Now the key can be moved up and down. You do have to have your pitch and time expansion pack enabled as per the coupon in your box. That's these two buttons here. If you want to get that key quickly back to normal, hold down shift and press this one here with reset written underneath it. And if you want a key sync to the other deck, press this one here. Be careful with this, you can get some pretty irregular results from it. Now underneath these two buttons here, which give us an instant acapella and an instant instrumental, you can see the stems lights here are lighting up to show me that I've got an instant acapella and an instant instrumental, because for instrumental it's turned off the vocals, and for a cappella it's left only the vocals on, right? You've also got the wording where it says stems effects underneath those buttons. They're just another way of using the effect that's associated with that particular, either the whole instrumental or the vocal. So if you weren't looking at the stems pad mode earlier, let's just have another look at those two. You could hear it was echoing out the instruments and the vocal, and you could see the pads reflecting that as if I'd pressed the pad. I was in stems mode there, so you could see that, but I could have been in hot cue mode and got exactly the same response. It's just a useful way of getting to those features then if you're somewhere else here. There's another stems feature that we haven't looked at yet, and that is stems EQ, because you can use the EQ, the standard EQ on the mixer here. So obviously here on the mixer, we've got our low, mid and high EQs. But we've also got this function here, stem level. By holding down the shift button, either shift button will do, and tapping stem level, the Q button will flash, and that tells me I'm in stem level mode. Now, these are going to affect my stems. The low EQ will change the drums volume. The mid EQ will change a combination of the bass and the melody, and the high EQ is the vocal. Okay, how you doing? We're about halfway through. I haven't covered the very, very basic stuff here because it's very basic. It's on everything from toy controllers upwards. If you're buying something like this, I assume you know the real basics of how a mixer works and all that kind of thing, right? But what I know you're going to want to know in detail is how all the effects work on here. And so we're going to spend a bit of time now playing some music and going through literally every single effect on both of these units. And we're going to start off with the channel effects. So the channel effects are these effects here, these blue knobs here. You have one per channel of music, hence they're called the channel effects. This blue knob here, by the way, is also an effect, but this is for this microphone channel. and it's different. So this is set by default to a echo, but you can also change it to a reverb. I'll show you how to do that a little bit later on. And this microphone is the one that plugs in around the back that we've already looked at. You get your on-off button for it there. You get your on button there. You have your shift button, which will let you talk over the music by dimming the music a little bit. And you've got your level and your low-high EQ. So the microphone there with its effect is separate from mic 2, which we'll look at a little bit later on. So these effects here are pretty simple to use. You dial in one of the ones that you want by pressing its button here, and that's going to affect all 4 channels. So if you have filter set here, you're going to have the same filter on all 4 channels. You can turn it off and on as much as you want. In other words, you can have it set completely off on these 2, a little bit on here, a little bit on in a different way here, but it's still the same effect. You can't say I want filter on this one and noise on this one or whatever. It's one of these for everything. So that does keep it quite simple, but they do have a few nuances. So I'll talk you through those as we go through them now with the track playing. So I'm going to pick something that's a little bit different from what we've been listening to. It's got a bit of drum and bass playing. Okay, so press filter. This is going to get the filter on. And on this channel here, which you can see its level is playing here, I can dial in the filter effect. So you can hear this is going down all the way to high extreme, and then back to the middle where the click is, it'll be back to nothing. So that's a low pass filter, which means it's letting the low frequencies pass, but it's filtering out the high frequencies, hence the name. The other direction is a high pass filter. The next one is filter roll. So this has the same roll effect that we heard on the pads earlier, mixed with a filter, and it gets more extreme again as you move away from the center. You can hear both the filter and the speed of the roll are changing as we get further away from the middle. It's quite nice that you can see on the waveform what it's doing. And it's back to where it would have been had you not pressed it. So you have that slip functionality that roll is all about there as well. So noise is the next one. Interesting thing about noise, if I stop the track playing, the noise effect will still work. Because it's nothing to do with the music, it's just a swooshy noise effect over the top of it. It's the only one that's like that. The next one is flanger. Now these effects are software effects. They only work when you are playing them on a channel that you're feeding in from your computer. They don't work when you've got an external channel plugged in, say on 3 or 4. By the way, the switches for that are here. These are the USB computer and line, the external input around the back. And this is where you change from the 2 computer inputs, A and B. Anyway, you have to have it set to a computer input for them to work, except the filter. The filter will work on everything, records, CDs, anything you've got plugged in around the back, the filter will still work on, but you won't get filter roll, noise or flanger with these channel effects when you're using external inputs on channels 3 and 4. Okay, let's move on to the big ones, of course. They're called the main effects for a reason, because we're going to spend quite a lot of time on these. They are on both these controllers. On the Rane Performer, they've got slightly more, and they've got some fader effects as well, which we'll look into. But also on the Rane 4, you get nearly all the main effects that we're going to look through now on the Performer, which does make these pretty unique and pretty special. Let's dive in. So the big things you need to know about these right from the off. This is a lot of control for usually one effect that you use wherever you want to use it in your mixing. So whatever we have dialed in here is going to work across the whole thing. You have two paddles, and these paddles turn the effect on for that selected channel, and you select the channel here. And they turn it off here. Pushing down is temporary. So you can see it's flashing to tell me that it would be on, but as soon as I take my hand off, it flicks back. So choose the channel you want the effect on, turn it on or off here. So you get two chances to turn it on or off, but it's only the same effect you're using across all the channels, and it's post fader. It happens after it's traveled through the fader, and so the effect will carry on wherever that's set. So this is the main screen. This gives us feedback on the currently set BPM for the effects, because another thing about this section here is the effects cycle according to the BPM of the track, in most cases anyway. So it gives us the current BPM of each track, and it's automatically grabbed from the track's beat grid information. Our drum and bass track here is 174. The standard is 120. It will just assume 120 unless it's picked up something different. This value in the middle is how quickly it cycles. It's currently set to half a beat. And underneath we have a parameter value. I'll talk to you about parameters in a minute. Here we have the 6 effects which you can choose from. Now, there's a lot more than 6, but you have 6 that are immediately available by pressing one of these buttons. By default, they are echo, recycler, scale, reverb, matrix, and echo out. But you can change these. And the way you change these is by holding down one of the effects and turning this parameter knob here. And if you look on the screen where my little finger is now, it's going through all the different effects that I could potentially put onto this button here. When you find one that you like and you want to experiment with on that button, you press it down and it lights up like that to tell you that you changed it to that effect. Now I left it on echo there just to keep things simple. Now, as we've already started to see, this display is showing us this. There's different settings you can have for the effects. For instance, on this echo, it's currently set to a half beat echo. You can change this by using this joystick here. It's got left and right, but up and down will cycle through the values you've got here. And so I'm cycling up to 4 beats, 8 beats. You might decide that actually for an echo, you generally want 1 beat, not half a beat. And you want that to be the way it is when you go to the echo at any point. So anything you set here, you can save with the echo by holding down its button for 4 seconds. And then it says FX saved. So now every time we go to the echo, it's now going to be set to what we had it set to when we pressed the save button. And that's the same even if you turn the unit off and come back to it, which is really nice because you can set the effects up exactly how you want them on those buttons. And then every time you power up and you're ready to go, they're your effects that are saved there. And you can even return to your user-defined setting or the factory setting if you've changed it by holding down Shift and just tapping that again. It will go back to whatever the default setting is for the chosen effect, whose button you just touched. Now, there's sometimes a case where you want the effect to cycle to a BPM which isn't the BPM of the current track, or it might even have got the BPM wrong of the current track. All effects like this have a tap function on all gear, and there's one on here as well where you can tap along to the beat you want the effect to follow, and it will respect that rather than what it's getting from the track that you're currently playing. In order to tap in the BPM, we just press the tap button on the deck that we've currently got selected, and to select the deck, you see both BPMs are showing here, 174 for my drum and bass track and 120 by default. We've got this little joystick moving left and right. So if I wanted to tap in a new BPM for this, I will tap this, and after 3 taps, it will start to listen to what I'm telling it. There you go. I'm tapping it at about 114 BPM there. You can reset that by holding the tap button like this. It'll go back to auto. It's jumped back to what it thinks the BPM is for that deck. Now, this unit is all about the hardware effects, but Serato does have its own effects, and there are advantages to using Serato's effects. For instance, it's possible within Serato's own effects to have more than one going and to gang them together and stuff. So if you're used to using Serato's effects, if you've used a controller in the past that hasn't got its own effects, or you just want a change, you want something else to experiment with, it's really easy to switch all these controls we've been looking at over to controlling Serato's effects. The way you do that is you just tap this button here. It goes to software effects there, this goes yellow, and now we're controlling the effects that Serato has that you can see in the middle of the screen there. And to get them up on the screen in Serato, you just click the effects button at the top, which makes it easier to see what you're controlling. Go back to the hardware effects here. So this parameter knob here, if we click on it, it will cycle through any parameters for the effect that can be dialed in. So for instance, we're still on the echo. The parameters here are high pass filter cut. So it'll decide how high the effect goes before the high pass filter kicks in, and you can move this to change that. Again, you can save it with the effect in the way I've just shown you. But if you click on here, it'll give you any others. In this case, feedback, which in the case of the echo is how long the echo goes on for, crudely. Effects are all about finding new ways to do stuff that maybe other people haven't done and that works for you and your style of DJing, which is why, you know, most people are going to use very, very, very little of this most of the time. But it's good to know it's there because it just might trigger when you're DJing and think, I'll give that a go. Here's one that I would definitely put underneath that category. It is changing the BPM of the track manually. So we've seen how to tap it in, we've seen how to make it automatically grab the BPM from the deck, but you can change it manually. You set the deck that you want to change, so I set it to the right hand deck to 120 here. You hold down shift and then you turn the parameter and you can see it's moving the BPM of that deck up. You might decide to do this with the effect triggered just for the hell of it, just to see what it sounds like. So that's how you do it if you want. Again, holding on this button here will put it back to the default. And finally, unlike the channel effects, which are just basically affected, they are what they are, you get a chance to decide the mix between the original audio and the affected audio using the wet dry knob, and I don't know what it's called here, it's called depth on this particular unit. And so depth all the way down here, you won't hear anything, you'll just hear the original audio no matter what you do here. In the middle you'll hear a mix of them both, there's a click in the middle, and around this way you'll only hear the affected audio and you won't hear any of the original audio when you trigger the effect here. So here's how we're going to do it then. There are 24 effects which are on both the Rane 4 and the Rane Performer. There are 6 effects, as we've seen, which are set by default on the unit, and we'll start off by looking through those. Then we'll look at all the other effects that are on both, and then towards the end of this effects demo, I'll talk you through the fader effects, which are the ones that are only on the Rane Performer. Let's go. Echo is our first effect of the 6 presets. By default, echo is set to 80% feedback. I'll talk to you about what feedback means in a second, and it is set to a high pass filter cut of 244 Hertz. And again, I'll tell you what this means and demonstrate what this means to you in a second. It's also set to half a beat by default, which means it's going to echo every half beat. Let's take a listen to it. If I set it to 1 beat, it will sound different. They're the two that most people use, half and 1 beat echo. So high pass filter cut decides how much of the signal gets echoed. So if I set high pass filter cut to a very high amount, say 4000 Hertz, it's only going to echo the very top end of the signal, the treble. And conversely, if I turn that all the way down, it will echo everything. So feedback is about how long it echoes for. So this is currently set to 80%, which is a good place to have it, but you can turn it up to say 100%, and that will give you quite a long echo. And of course, turning it down to something very low will give you a very short, snappy echo. This is 20%. Now you've had a demo of what I meant earlier when I said these are post-fader effects, because when I faded the track out, the echo continued until it had finished doing its thing. In other words, the fader was not respected. What was respected was the effect doing its thing and finishing, which is often preferred by DJs when they're getting deep into effects because it's more natural, right? You don't want to cut an echo off until it's finished working. It doesn't feel right, doesn't sound right. So these are all post-fader effects. Let's move on to the next one then. Recycler is another echo effect, but it's got a very different feel to it. So your defaults on Recycler are resonance medium, and the default echo length is 3/4 of a beat. Remember, we can change all of these things ourselves. You can change the value of the 3/4 of a beat by pushing this up and down as we looked at. I'll leave it on 3/4. So this is something that you get more control with this knob than you do with most of these effects. It's the first time I've shown you this knob in using it with a actual audio playing through it. So in the previous effect, this would have just made the echo slightly louder. But on this effect, it gives you control over the feedback, how much echo you get, and you can actually make the echo go on kind of forever, which is pretty cool. Let's have a listen then. So you can hear that's kind of going on forever. If we turn this down, we can make it last less time. So this is a feedback as well as a kind of, it's more, think of this more as an intensity control on this particular effect. So another go. See, down here we're getting less feedback, less volume, less everything. But if we turn this up high, it really is extreme. It's actually getting louder, not quieter, right? So another thing we can change on this one is resonance. And so resonance is all about how musical it sounds. So you'll notice the echo here sounds a little bit more like it's been processed, a little bit more colored than on the previous kind of clean echo. And resonance gives us our control over how much of that we get. So let's change that to high and have a listen to what difference this makes. You can kind of hear more harmonics, more feedback. Just generally, it's a more extreme effect. And then if you set it to low, obviously you'd get a lower version of that effect playing. Scale, or scale down to give it its full title, is a pretty freaky effect to choose as one of the defaults, I would say. But hey, that's what they've done. So let's take a look at it. So the defaults on scale down are the major key and 3/2 for the beat time. Don't worry too much about that for now. Let's just have a listen though to what happens when we engage it, and then we can have another talk about what's going on here. So what's going on here then is that it is taking a sample at the length that is written here of the track, and then it is playing it down in the major scale. That's why it says scale major. So it's going down a note every time, or rather a note that is represented in the major scale every time. And so that is a kind of musical effect, almost like someone tinkling down on a piano with the sample that it's taken. Now we can change the scale. That's the parameter value here. So I can change the scale to a minor scale, to whole notes, or to a pentatonic scale. And so these are music, if you're not a musician, these aren't going to mean that much to you. I think minor sounds better in dance music, frankly. Let's have a little listen to it set to minor. Kind of up to you, which one you like the sound of. Obviously a good way of fading out a track. The depth knob in this instance gives you volume from 0 all the way up to the middle. In other words, it makes the bit that we're hearing get louder. But from the middle to the other side, it shortens the length of the sample. If I leave this all the way up here, you'll hear that the samples have got more space between them. And the timing here is our way of choosing how long that takes to sample down through the different notes. So if we set the beat time to something a lot less, set it to half a beat, it's going to sound very different. Next on our 6 presets is reverb. It's the big room effect. It's the effect that's the opposite of this. This room. It's so quiet and so deadened. But if you were in a cathedral or if you were in a large hall, of course my voice would sound very, very different. Reverb gives you that, but to your music. It's one of those effects that is just on everything. And so on this unit, the reverb effect is this one here, and its defaults are large, which means large room. You can change that by using the beat joystick to small, which is the other variant that you've got there. Its defaults are high pass cut at 244 Hertz, which is the same as with the Echo. It's just cutting off some of the very bassier sounds when you trigger it. And its other default, if I press the parameter button here, is that decay is 75%. In other words, that's how long it's going to take to disappear against the maximum of 100%. On this particular one, again, this is just the intensity of the effect. We'll leave it nice and high so you can hear what it sounds like. And this is what it sounds like at the defaults. It's actually not my favorite reverb among effects units on DJ controllers. I just don't think it's got as much of the character as some reverbs do have. Anyway, moving on to Matrix. It's another one that's a bit of a head scratcher for me, but you might like it. Effects are very, very subjective after all. Matrix is it kind of like samples and plays back an increasingly shorter length of the track after you trigger it, and then ends up playing back for as long as you want, and that's based upon how you have the knob, the depth knob set at this level. Really hard to explain, reasonably easy to play it to you, of course, so let's do that. I mean, it's a proper scattergun effect, isn't it? But what it did was take the little bit of the track that was playing when I clicked it on and played it increasingly shorter until it played it over and over again at half beat lengths. Let's do this with the depth knob all the way up, and this will let us keep the half beat length playing infinitely. You might hear this and think, oh, I can actually think of a reason I might want to use that. You can change the length here. This is one of the parameters from 1 to 9. It's set to 5 by default, and you can use the beat knob to decide the length of beat that it ends up on. But yeah, like I say, not one that are you going to find me using an awful lot. I have to be honest with you about that. And moving on to the final one, which is a far, far more useful one. It's kind of taken us full circle back to where we started because it's another Echo. In fact, this one is Echo Out. The main difference with Echo Out over Echo is that it actually fully mutes the track you're playing as long as the depth knob is at halfway or further, and it cuts off at an even lower frequency on the high pass filter, which is the only parameter, which means it's a fuller, more extreme echo, and the depth knob will let you continue the echo going forever and ever and ever just by turning it further in this direction. Designed to help you do what it says on the tin. Echo the currently playing track out. You don't even have to stop the track playing as long as you're using it in the way I've just described. It will just do that for you, so it's a very useful one. Let's have a listen. Currently set to the default of half a beat. You'll notice that the currently playing track will stay completely out of the mix until I turn this past halfway and back down that way, which means it's very useful. Because you don't actually have to stop the turntable here playing in order for the track to fade out. You can do all of that on the depth knob. Practice that one for getting from one track to another quickly in the mix, which is what it was made for. Okay, they are all the default effects. We're now going to go through, and there's a lot of them, all the others. I'm not going to spend quite as much time on playing around with all the parameters. I'll leave you to do that. Hold down the effect that you wish to switch for another one, turn the effects select or parameter knob here, and find the one you want by moving through it. We're going to start right at the very beginning, backspin, and then press the parameter button with the effect button held, which will assign it. Backspin is exactly what you think it is. It's spinning the platter back to stop the track, and it will stop the track dead even if the track is still playing. So literally with one flick of the paddle you can perform a great sounding backspin. Now you don't need to worry about anything that's written on the screen here for this one. Trust me, this is the only thing you need to know about the depth knob. Leave it set to the defaults and the depth knob will give you a longer or a shorter backspin. I'll leave it set to the middle now so you can hear the classic how it comes out the box one, and then we'll play a longer and a shorter one afterwards. So there's your default. A stupidly long one. And a little bit shorter there. And you can go even lower than that if you want. Next up is beat break. Beat break is a bit like slicer. Remember that on the pads? On steroids. You get 10 patterns that you can play with and trigger over the music. It will take little samples of the music and rearrange them. It's a really cool effect. So as I'm going to do all the way through now, I'm just going to select it and put it onto the echo button here. So beat breaks, I'm going through using the beat joystick in the background here. To move through these 10 patterns here. And so pattern number 8 is really nice with drum and bass. So I'm going to turn the depth all the way up and let's have a listen to it. Definitely worth experimenting there with your music and finding the ones that sound best to you. Moving on then, BitCrusher is a 8-bit kind of like back to the video games, back to the Atari 80s days, and it gives you that kind of lo-fi sound. You also have a parameter here, which is the bit depth, but I find that using the beat joystick is the best way to add some stuff there and then finding the depth that works for you on that one. Next up then, we have break. This is related to the spin back, the previous vinyl effect that we looked at, because break is just the one that does the same thing actually as the start time knob. It breaks the track and stops the track playing. So let's... So you can hear again, just like that previous one, the more you put the depth knob up, the longer the break time you get. Bit pointless really when you've got a nice stop time button, a knob on the unit itself, but I guess if you want to keep that set somewhere and then use this one as an effect, it's there if you need it. Moving on, chopper is similar to the gate effect that you find on some gear, sometimes called a transform effect as well. It's literally like you are chopping the audio in and out with the crossfader. You get lots of patterns on chopper. The default pattern is pattern number 7, but I've set it to pattern number 1. Again, you use this beat joystick to move between the patterns, but pattern number 1 is the simplest one, makes it easier to show you what's going on. Let's have a listen. You select the other patterns by moving through here like this. So lots and lots of esoteric patterns for you to play with. And the parameter in this instance is a reverse, which is quite interesting. Let's have a listen to that. Next up is cyclone. This is another delay effect and quite an extreme one where you get to select an amount of time that gets delayed, but also how often it happens independently. So using the beat control will change the how often it happens, and delay time is changed on the parameter. Sounds like this. You'll notice that I was using the depth again there, past halfway will kind of hold it forever and then taking it down here will make it fade out slowly. We actually already know the next one, which is just the straight delay. So let's move on from that to the one past it, which is the duck echo. Before we go any further, it's just worth pointing out, if you're just watching this going, blimey, look at that. There's that and that and that as well. How am I ever going to get my head around all of these? You'll notice that they're all related. You'll notice there's only a certain number of effects, really, basic effects, and these are all variations or combinations thereof. So don't get confused, just know they're there. And if there's any that take your fancy, make a note and come back to them. Remember, most DJs use fewer than 1 or 2 effects, generally. They might use a reverb, they might use an echo, they might just use a filter, and that's about it. But they find their favorites. So the idea here is that you'll find your favorite. So this is a different kind of echo, not by virtue of the fact of how it sounds or what the settings are, but by virtue of how you control it, because this one is controlled by the crossfader. Let's try it. So why would you want to do that? Well, if you assign it to one deck and use the crossfader, it's a nice way of performing the echo out style effect and getting onto another deck without having to mess around with anything other than your crossfader once you've got it engaged, which is pretty cool. Okay, let's move on to our past our echo and past our echo out, which we know, to our flanger, a new kind of effect. Or is it? Well, it isn't actually, because we've seen it on the channel effects, haven't we? It's another way of accessing one of those flanger, speaker spinning round style effects. The big difference though in using a flanger when you're going to trigger it here rather than on the knobs above is that it has a value attached to it for how quickly it goes around, if you like. So you can have a slow flanger, it's set to 16 here, and that's probably the default, but you can then move it down to lower values as well. We'll leave it at 16 though and have a listen to it. Gets more extreme and a bit more unusual when you get it to a much lower value. It's usually one of those long sweeps up at 16 or 32 or even 64. So next up is hold echo. This is an echo which does what its name suggests. It holds the part of the track that's being echoed infinitely if you want it to. Hold echo is useful when you don't want it to echo out at all. You just want it to continue. So it sounds like this. You can make it more extreme or less extreme. I've got it set to 1 beat there, but you could set this to any beat value you wanted. Also the parameters, you've got high pass, filter, cut, but the other parameter you've got is the initial feedback, which is currently set to 80%, but you can have it set up to 100, which just means that it gives you an even more extreme version of the hold echo. The next one isn't an effect at all. It's just a way of making the paddles do something that you can do in other ways as well. It's called mute. We'll go past matrix, which we've already seen, and select mute. So mute has got nothing going on here apart from invert. There's no parameters apart from this one, invert. And so we'll leave invert off at the moment for the first demo of it. It's literally muting the track. When I press the paddle momentarily or switch on and off, the track goes off. In the past, people have used, any button that will do it to do that. It could be switching the source button at the top away from the computer or whatever. But this is an easy way of doing it on the paddle. And that's its one parameter, invert. Turn the invert parameter so this is on, and then it will invert what the effect does. So effectively the track isn't playing when you're not touching the paddle. Clearly this is useful when you're dropping things in and out of the mix and you want to quickly cut without having to use the crossfader, the faders, or any other button, knob, or way that you've figured out to do it. Okay, so moving on to the phaser, which is similar to the flanger that we've already heard. It's currently doing it every 16 beats, but again, like the flanger, this is more normal to have a long sweep on it. You can alter it using the beats to make it a little bit more extreme. Let's get it down to like 2 beats. As usual, depth. We'll give you more or less of it, and your parameter is feedback there, which is again just the intensity of the effect. So moving on to pitch down. Pitch down is a bit like scale down, which we've already heard, but it doesn't use musical scales of any type. It just has a length control. It's set to 7 by default, which sounds like this. And there I set it to lower and higher values, which gives you a more or less extreme effect on the pitch down. Next up, we have the pumper. This is basically a side chain. If you've ever used a digital audio workstation, then you know that you can feed one channel into another, and depending on how loud one channel is, the other channel gets quieter. It's often used to dim down the background music so that the kick drums come through in the mix. You can do a similar thing using the pumper on here. I'm only going to demonstrate it on one channel, but it could be very useful for getting music playing over a prominent drum on the other deck, for instance. So here's how it works. So with the pumper, we have the offset, which is how far off the beat it happens. Obviously, as with the previous couple where I haven't bothered doing this, you can change the beat value as well. So it's currently set to 1, but I could change the beat value up to 4 or whatever I want here. I'm just going to leave it set to 1 for now. And then you can decide on the amount of kind of duck that happens. In other words, how much quieter it gets every time it cycles. So by switching to that parameter here, you can see that that's the depth in decibels that it's going to cut down to. I think that's probably the default there, -20. Let's have a listen to it, which will make it all clear. You can hear it's ducking in and out nice and subtly every beat there. Let's set it to every 2 beats. Using the depth control will give you more cutout, and taking it the other way will give you less. Again, think of this like a side chain effect. We're getting to some pretty wacky stuff now. The next one is called Rider. So let's move past the recycler and past the reverb, which we already know, to Rider. So Rider, as you can see here, has got scale as one of its parameters. In fact, the only parameter is scale. So by adjusting scale to major or minor or octaves or pentatonic, I can get different sounds to what we're about to witness. And what we're about to witness is this. When I trigger the effect, it's going to sample based upon the beat value I've got. I've got 1 beat selected here, and repeat the sample, but it's going to go up and down based upon the scale I've got set here. So what I was doing there was changing all the different scales. I was using the depth knob, which allowed me to choose how much of the sample was played each time. And I was using the beat control to decide how quickly it repeated the little part that it had sampled. So You choose how you're going to use that. I've no idea how I would, but hey, it's there if you need it. And finally, for the effects that you find on the Rane 4, although we're using the Performer, these are all the ones so far that you can get on the Rane 4, is the riser effect. Riser is an effect that takes whatever track we're playing, samples it, makes it go higher and higher and higher, and finally fade out. And we have the length of time it takes to do that. It's currently set to 7, and the speed, if you like, so it's currently set to 3/4 of a beat that it does it at. So let's have a play with it. Even though the track's still playing, stopped it now, it stops the track playing. So in other words, you turn this on and leave it on, and it will stop the current track dead in its tracks, literally. So the idea of this is it's a nice way of ending whatever you're playing in the mix and getting completely off that track entirely. So for instance, if I now set it to a, let's say set it to a 2 beat value and set the length to lower, we'll get a very different effect. Now, when Rane launched this mixer, which is the A-track edition of the Rane 70 mixer, one of the things that they included was fader effects, and they are on the Rane Performer. They're not on the Rane 4. There's 5 of them, and it won't take me too long to show you what they do, because the main thing about them is that they use the faders rather than any other controls to control the intensity of the effect. Let's take a look. What you need to know about these effects is that you have to select one. I'll select here to start with fader filter, and you have to turn it on, but you also have to turn it on here. If you have it turned on here, your volume fader will no longer control the volume of the track. It will when it's off, but even when there's no effect triggered, because you need to use the paddle to trigger it, it will disable the volume control. So if you find your faders aren't working, it might be that you've got a fader effect turned on by mistake here. Okay, so we'll start off with fader filter then. A band pass, a high pass and a low pass filter controlled on your fader. This one is fader pitch, which is going to give us some pitch effects on the track once it's triggered. It's pitching down in a minor key. That's what this is telling us. Minor key, and this is what we get: minor, major, or off for the key. And the DW is telling us that it's going down, and we can control that using the beat control. This is a ring modulator. This will add a ring modulation, which is like a lo-fi sound, to the currently playing track, and moving it up and down will change the pitch of the ring modulation. One of those that's much easier to demonstrate than to talk about, so let's do it. Kind of related to the Josh Wink higher state of consciousness noise, that acid tweaky noise, don't you think? But anyway, you get the frequencies on the beat control there, and you get the increase or decrease as you move the fader up and down, whether it gets higher or lower. The next one along then is our fader roll. This is a classic roll effect, but in this instance we can do it on the fader and we're not having to do it on the pads or anywhere else. Let's have a listen. Here we have got the high pass filter on the fader roll, so it decides whether we're rolling the whole track or just the high frequencies if you want a cleaner version of that. And then finally we've got the fader tone. Now this actually adds a tone over the top of the current track, and it can be a sine wave or it can be other types of waves, a sawtooth wave or a square wave or a triangle wave. and it's you don't even need the track switched on in order to hear it. So it's a bit like the noise effects that we heard earlier up on the channel effects, in that it's independent of the track. It's adding something over the top of it. So let's have a listen to it on its own without any track playing at first. So here it is. So I was messing about there using the different scales and also the different types of sine wave, square wave, triangle wave, whatever generator you want to use. And also in here we have octaves, so you can actually choose the pitch of the note, the starting octave of the note as well here. So if I want a lower octave, here it's going to be a lot different sounding. If you're listening to that on your phone, you wouldn't have heard a thing then, because it was such a low octave. Let's go a couple higher. So the idea here is that you can come up with weird and wonderful tones to play over the top of your tracks. The track we've got loaded and that we've been listening is in the key of F. And so if I were to select the key of F, which I actually already have done here because I was showing you moving the keys around on the beat control. If I select the key of F, and let's put it in a slightly higher octave, let's go up to one of those high ones there, then I could in theory jam over the top of the track. No idea what this will sound like, but you'll get the idea quite quickly, I'd imagine. There's my tone. I don't think I'm going to be winning any awards for that performance, but you get the idea. And I think we finished the effects now. We're now going to move back to some of the other bits and pieces around the unit that we've not had a chance to touch on as I've been going through everything else. Particularly, we haven't looked at the front panel, and there's just a few controls elsewhere, again, that I haven't fully touched on. Then we're going to look at the settings, because there's a whole settings menu in this thing. And most of what I'm about to show you, again, becomes relevant to the Rane 4 as well. It's only really the fader effects and the jogwheels that are the big differences between the two. Right, let's take a look then. I think we should start by going round to the front panel where we haven't been before. So from the left, we've already seen the microphone 1 controls, which are at the top left of the mixer. This is microphone 2. You plug it in around the back, but you control it at the front. You've got the on-off switch. You've got the level, and you've got the high and low EQs there as well. The next set of controls are the crossfader controls. So you have crossfader contour, which decides how quickly the crossfader cuts in and out. You also have the tension adjust, which is pretty cool because this makes the crossfader either very stiff or you turn it completely the other way. And this is a mechanical control. It makes it very loose. So you get to choose how you want that. These little buttons here are for the channels, and they decide whether the crossfader works or not. If you have them set to the middle through, it won't work, but if you have them set to left, the crossfader will fade to that channel when you push it to the left, and obviously the same thing for the right. And then down here, it's the headphone controls, including the split Q control, which lets you put the master in one ear and the Q in the other. You also have the Q mix control and the overall level control for the headphones. So I was trying to think of anything else that I've forgotten to cover here. And most of it's pretty obvious really, but there are a few little bits and pieces before we get on to the settings. So let's take a little peek. So main volume control, the booth volume control for the booth volume outputs on the back, and also the sampler level, the overall level for the sampler. And I think I talked about the fact that this button will assign the whole sampler to channel 4, so you can use everything that you'd usually use with an audio channel from your sampler there. One thing we didn't touch on was holding down shift and moving a fader will give you what's called fader start. So if we go like this, it's jumping to the cue point I've got set and letting me quickly stutter it in with the fader. Again, that's another nice way of using the faders that you've got there. Now, if I hold down Shift and I press menu, it jumps us into this settings menu here. And now to close off our tour of the units, let's look through all the settings. They're very powerful. So the first one, in fact, we have seen some of these before. I've kind of alluded to them, but now we're going to go through them one by one. We have talked about the first one, silent cue. So in order to move around these, we use the joystick. Use the joystick to go left and right, and then up and down to select the parameters. So in this instance, silent cue, I'm going to go right, and swap sensor is what it says. So when we go right again, we can say yes or no to swap sensor there. I'll leave it on no. So what that's telling us is if we turn that to yes, then as mentioned earlier, the sensor buttons will switch to being silent cue. And that means that if you prefer to use the silent cue function over the sensor one, you've got that one there instead. Now, moving on, we're going to go out of sensor and we're going to go down to channel faders and then go right to see what we've got here. So there's a few options here. Contour for the channel faders is currently set to 50%. And so what that means is that the channel faders will fade up and down smoothly. If we change that, and you can again use the up and down to change it. You see I'm changing it here. We can make it so that the channel faders cut in and out more aggressively, if you like, to make them more like an aggressive crossfader setting. So you get that on the channel faders as well as the crossfader on this unit. So you also get reverse on the channel faders. So that means that you can have the channel faders set so that they are off at the top and on at the bottom. Again, for performance, this might be something that you prefer. Now, out of there to crossfader, here's where the settings that we haven't seen on the hardware for the crossfader exist. So we can have the left cut in and the right cut in. And what that means is how quickly, or rather how far you have to move the crossfader from the very far left and the very far right position before it cuts in the next track. You can set that, you know, if you're quite clumsy and it kind of bounces, it might turn the next track on when you don't want it to. So you might want to set that a bit wider. These are really esoteric scratch settings, of course, but this is a very high-end device and performance DJs need this kind of stuff in order to get it working just how they want. So you get the cut in left and right, and you can also just restore the defaults there if you kind of mess it up. Right, so fader effects, easy. You can just turn the fader effects that we looked at on or off. If you don't use them, then you can turn them off and it means you're not scrolling past them all the time in the settings. Of course, that's only for users of the Rane Performer. So key adjust will let you set the key controls. So that's these controls here, so that you have to hard press them in order for them to start working. So if you're finding yourself accidentally touching these and the key of the track is changing, then setting that from normal to long means that you need a long press on them in order to make them start working. And once they are working, then they'll continue to work without you needing to keep pressing for a long time. But then they will revert back to that after a little while. So main meter is an interesting one that's been added recently. Main meter allows you to set the main output meter to either post or pre-main. It's set to post main by default, but you can change it. That's this meter here. So what that means is that currently, and in most mixers, and in this one when you get it out of the box, then as you turn up the main volume, this will go up. But you can set it so that this is showing you what happens before the signal goes through the main volume. So if you're using the main volume control to control the whole room, maybe you're the final part of the chain to the speakers, then you might want to have this set so that, you know, you've never got this anywhere near full, right? But you still want to make sure you're not distorting the output signal by what you're doing with the effects and so on after these meters. So you get that option there. Again, it's an esoteric one, but a lot of people are very careful with the way they gain stage their equipment. And it's nice to see that on there. Now, more new stuff. The microphone has got an effect choice now. You can choose echo or reverb. It used to only be echo. Remember on the microphone controls, we were looking at the microphone effect here that you can turn up or down using this to give you well, it's an echo by default, but now you've got the chance to add reverb instead and have that. I think reverb is a more useful effect on the microphone because if you've got a singer with you or something, then a little bit of reverb makes them sound good. You might not want an echo on there. Anyway, you get the choice. And then because of that, there are extra ways that you can play with the settings for echo feedback, which was always there, but you've now got a couple of reverb settings as well there that you can mess with. You've got a talk over level control there as well, which means that when you are using the talk over function, if you remember, you hold down the shift and hold this, which means the music will automatically duck out when you're talking on the microphone. It determines how much it ducks out by there. So you get that choice there, and also hold how long it holds it for in order to make sure the music comes back in as quickly or slowly as you want it to. Now, these are really useful controls. You can decide whether the microphone goes to the booth speakers. So this is interesting. If you are in a DJ booth and you're getting feedback, you can just turn off your microphone entirely in the speakers that are near to the microphone. Useful stuff. Also to your headphones. Some people like to monitor the microphone in their headphones, others do not. And also to the computer, really useful if you're live streaming and you want to talk to your audience, or you want to if you want to make sure that your recording of it that's going off somewhere else doesn't carry the microphone. And again, these all just have yes or no, or on or off settings. Okay, so motor torque decides whether the motors are basically powerful or very powerful. These are powerful motors. And so if you decide that actually you're feeling the motors are pulling a little bit too much, you're used to record decks that maybe are a little bit easier to control in that way, then you can set the motor torque here to high or low, or rather down to low to get that difference, but it's set to high by default. So wheel display can give you a few options here as to what is or isn't on the wheel. So day mode's an interesting one. So currently the wheels are looking like this, where you've got a dark background. So, I mean, if you've got a smartphone or whatever, you know all about day and night mode. Well, you get it on here as well. So if we set day mode to on, you'll see that these are now really bright. You can hardly read them on our camera, but that's by design, because if you're in really bright sunlight, then you will be able to see what's going on a little bit better here. And it works for everything, including the library as well. Again, you can't see that on the camera because the camera really doesn't like brightness like that, but that's the whole point of it. It's making the screens as bright as absolutely possible in order that you can see it if it is a bright day, and then of course turn it off like that. Needle marker will turn the needle marker on the track on or off, or rather on the displays on or off. You might have a physical needle marker on your vinyl, and that will make sure that you don't have two of them on the go. The needle marker is pretty accurate on these, but some DJs prefer to just do it the old school way. Time will set again on the displays whether the time showing on the display is the time remaining, which it currently is on here. It's saying I've got 2 minutes and 30 seconds left on there, but you can set the time to elapsed, which I've just switched it to there, and then it will tell us how much time we have had so far in the track. Again, it's all absolute personal preference stuff, this. So library view, you can just turn library view on and off. Currently the way it's set is as soon as I hit here, I'm looking through my library, but you might not want that. So if you don't want that, then you can turn that off here, and then you're not going to get library view. It's just not going to happen when you go like this. So if you're someone who's always got the laptop nearby, you're happy to look at the laptop for your library, there is your choice. Right, so list time and key will in library view, I'll just check I've left that on, yep. So list time and key in library view will swap key and time. So currently here we've got our key showing down in this second column, but you can set that to time and it'll show you how long the track is instead. If you don't DJ with key, then that's a good one. So this is the filter control for anything that you've got through the line or phono inputs. So if you've got these channels here set from USB to line and you've got something plugged in around the back, this decides what the filter that you hear, because remember the only effects that you hear, the only effects you can use from these four here are filter. It will decide what the filter sounds like. So you just get the usual resonance settings in there. There we go, resonance, and you can set it higher or lower to make it more or less musical. And that's it. Apart from that, you've just got your firmware for the controller, displays, DSP, motor, and mag fader. You can check the firmware that you've got currently installed against what you see on the website to see if it's time to update your firmware. Okay, as you've just seen, these are awesome units, and I've just given you a comprehensive video tutorial on everything they do. I hope you found it useful. But if you have 5 minutes more, I want to give you possibly the most important DJ lesson in this whole super long video, because as I said at the beginning, this is not the full picture. If you're already a seasoned DJ, yes, you have everything you need to decide if this is for you or to quickly get started if you've ordered one or just got one. But if not, the way we teach DJing in this book, as I said at the beginning, is all about getting you actually doing this and bypassing that trap of thinking you need to sit at home for months or years learning in private. Here at the school, our unique teaching method focuses on 5 big areas of DJing. So what I've just taught you lives in the first area, the gear. And in fact, is only one part of the gear knowledge that you need to be a DJ. As well as understanding your DJ console, you need to understand things like PA systems and gain staging and lots of other geeky stuff. And then there's the other 4 areas. There's music. You've got to know how to assemble and organize and work a music collection. So you've always got the right track to play next. You need to understand mixing, what you do on the gear with the music to make sure that it sounds good and to keep your dance floors full. And you need to know the secrets of performing, because doing this in public is very different to doing it in your bedroom. Finally, there are so many directions DJing can take you in from there. Do you want to play festivals or clubs, parties, or maybe get a residency? Do you want to make mixtapes? Do you want to learn to podcast or run a radio show? Or do you just want to produce the best DJ mixes in the world for yourself to listen to? It's only when you've made some choices in these areas and got the important skills nailed in all those 5 gear, music, mixing, performing and success that you're going to start feeling you're making progress as a DJ. You can learn them. But the big mistake that people make is only trying to learn one of them. I think you can probably guess which one. Typically it's the techniques, it's mixing. I just want to learn to mix, people say. That's why a lot of the DJ courses out there are all about mixing. But guess what? If you don't understand the gear, if you're hopeless at finding and organizing the music, if you're too scared to perform because no one's taught you through the steps of doing that successfully, and you haven't got a clue where to go from there, well, it's not actually going to help you that much knowing how to mix. So that's why our fast track approach to DJing success, the 5 steps that we teach in this book that include mixing, has helped so many DJs get more from this amazing hobby. I want you to have a free copy of this. So you can get this by joining the Digital DJ Tips School. The link is underneath and it's all free. And when you are ready, I'd be thrilled to have you as a student. Our training works for all DJ gear, including these units. And again, there is a link underneath. I'll see you there. But meanwhile, get good, get out there and make the moments. Bye for now.